The next topic is going to be something quite interesting. Uh, just food for thought. It's called the health quotient. Okay. And a country's economy is the potential of its people. So if you're with me, let's see what this whole thing about health quotient is and what it really is about. Now, just to understand what exactly is this health quotient is something that countries have devised, WHO and a lot of organizations have composed what they think is a score that they can give to the way people are living. Okay. Now, Spain actually, in a lot of surveys, it's always between Spain and Singapore. There's always this kind of back and forth. But if you look at these particular factors, what are the health risks? Do they have access to clean water? What is the average life expectancy? What is the nutrition they have? And also, what is the cause of deaths? Now, Spain seems to rank number one in this. And for a lot of good reasons, they have a very large variety of food. They have rich omega-3 in their diets. They have a good mix of protein and a lot of mineral content in their food. Okay. And clean water. They do drink quite a few wines as well. Okay. And they have quite a long life expectancy. They have a lot of sunlight. They get a lot of exercise. They have a lot of social activity. So there's a lot of vibrancy in that culture. And of course, the causes of death are not as high as other countries where heart attacks and, these NCDs, non-communicable diseases, are actually hitting the records. Okay. And India, unfortunately, is not even in the top 50. Okay. Now, this is okay. There are reasons for it because we've got a very large country. We have a large population. We're just kind of getting out of, we've been an independent country, far less than a lot of other countries in the world. And, the country is formed with almost nothing. I mean, it re-infrastructure everything. But it's not just that. If India were really a country that was hit so badly by poverty, the causes of death would be different. But now what is happening is these non-communicable diseases are now becoming the biggest problem even in our country. Heart attacks, hypertension, strokes, type 2 diabetes is now, India is the capital. Okay, we've got the most number of cases in the world and they're going to increase. And the problem is that if the country does not have a good health quotient, let's take, for example, somebody is about 40 years old and is probably at a senior manager level or probably running quite a steady business because he's probably been about 15 to 20 years and he's established himself. And he's the crux of his business or he's at the crux of his career. Now, a few years further, what will happen is if the NCD starts to take over, the type 2 diabetes comes in, the quality of life starts to come down. And for some people, it gets into heart attacks, they get into strokes, which is even worse because other things that you can actually control with medicine, but heart attacks just come like that. And what happens is that entire ability for that person to earn becomes almost zero. Now, this will happen one case at a time. Yeah, it's okay. It happens, right? But imagine if this were to happen 1 out of 10 people. Now, that's the ratio of what's happening in this country today. 1 out of, if 10 people, okay, one of them is going to be probably somewhere close to an ICU very soon. So 10% of that population is going to be away from the economic growth. It automatically means you just about reduced your economy by 10%. Okay. And now if this starts going to 25%, okay, it's 25%. Is that a big deal? Yes, it is a big deal because it's not just the 25% of the people that are going to be off the economic track. It's another 5% of the people are going to be engaged to help these people out, which means your medical resources, your hospitals, and family members are going to be involved in supporting those 25%. So what happens? So now you further degraded down to another 30%. And we don't know whether that 5% is also going to succumb to the same problems because they may not have time. So all in all, it's a kind of vicious and kind of funny circle. This fight keeps happening. And if we just forward the clock another 20 years, a country's economy might be down almost 40% or even more. And if you look up to the year 2050 is what they say, a lot of countries are going to be in a situation where they cannot support their economy. And how does it start? I mean, it's just so simple. It starts with you eating the right food. You can't believe that. Now, access to that food, or education, understanding, we'll talk about that. Okay. So aged populations are going to increase. There are going to be more and more older people to look after. And they're not going to be in part of the economy. They're going to be probably somebody who needs to be supported by the existing people. Because when people do get old, and if they're not, if they can't look after themselves, then it's going to put a strain on some service or some person. And of course, this has become a big concern for the WHO and the world at large, is that the GDPs of certain countries are just going to plummet. It's going to fall, sink. And that's not good for the world, because as we know, just during the COVID time, that if one center didn't produce or was not able to export a certain component, that was it. Suddenly prices have gone up. So what might not work in one country is going to affect the world. So this is not something small or lightly. People should take it lightly. It is definitely affecting the world. And we've had, of course, the war is out. Ukraine was supplying a lot of wheat to the world. And they say that parts of Africa are actually going to go into a famine because they're not able to supply that amount of wheat. So they have to go and procure that wheat from probably more expensive sources. And that's going to change the way their eating habits are going to change, because they're going to eat less, and sometimes they may not even eat because, wow, it's just really become expensive. We just think about what's happened recently, because we've had kind of an attack on the tomatoes in Karnataka that's gone up to 120, 130 rupees a kilo. Okay. So what's going to happen? People are going to stop eating that. They say, no, what's the point? I can't afford it. I'll just wait. I'll just wait it out. Right. In fact, they've said that McDonald's has stopped putting sliced tomato in the burger in India. And they said, no, it's nothing to do with the price. It's that we're not getting the right quality of tomatoes. Okay, they're hidden behind that. But I'm just telling you, just one item like a tomato is gone a little crazy. Just imagine. Now, if you don't have people to cultivate this, or if you don't have people to distribute this, if everyone is sick, what's going to happen, right? So a country's health quotient affects even the tourism, because if somebody comes and he says, oh, I'm sitting in a restaurant, but the restaurant has only one waiter. Why? All the remaining 90 are sick. Okay, so people say, I'm not going to come back here again. Well, I get a coffee in like 1 hour. No way, I'm not going to come here. And of course, investment is going to go away, because say if the workforce is becoming smaller and they're like always falling sick, gosh, this is not a place where I want to go and open up a factory. I don't want to go and pump in a couple of $1 billion here. And as we know, like I said, we may not have enough caretakers for the people who are sick. This is going to become a huge problem. In fact, even geriatric care is something that is almost like it's becoming impossible in big cities to actually find any proper geriatric care without paying arm and a leg and a whatever. Okay, it is coming up, but these are challenges that a health quotient will place on any country and any economy. And it doesn't matter, oh, it's happening in America, it won't happen to me. No, the point is that everybody is in the supply chain. Everybody is in the middle of this mix. So it's not something we can take very lightly. It's something that the world is definitely looking at. And you'll see that these the kind of things that are going to happen in the future globally are going to be kind of very focused around having this health quotient go up. Now, a lot of reasons why this happened, why do we have this low health quotient? A lot of it comes down to a kind of basic set. Access to clean water. And as we're getting more industrialized and as we are generating more and more garbage, our access to clean water and, of course, population growth is reducing the ability to get access to clean water. Now, there have been instances where companies have taken advantage of, restricting supply of clean water. Yeah, it's happened. Historically, there are things that have happened where people have, because of, not because of nature, but because of, corporate, whatever you want to say, strategy, they've kind of been able to cut off supply of water to people. So access to clean water is extremely important. I had no idea about what nutrition is all about. You're just kind of eating because you're humoring your stomach, and you've really not understood what are the key components of nutrients and what nutrition is available, what can you get, what can you afford. I mean, there are a lot of things, a lot of factors. But if you don't know about it, then you're just going to be eating junk. Why? Because it's cheap. So it's cheap, I can feed myself and get on with it. Okay, but that cheap thing is going to cost you about 100,000 times more later. And of course, bad lifestyle habits. Okay, just doing all the wrong things at the wrong time, and nobody knows what. But these are the causes of a low health quotient in a community. Now, I'll just give you cite a very perfect example. In our own country, in India, the biggest problem is that tea dumped with a lot of sugar is kind of like a staple go-to kind of thing for everyone, and people indiscriminately just keep doing it because they think it's safe, they think it's good. The tea is great by itself, the milk is great, but it's that white sugar that gets into it that causes all the havoc, and people do it subconsciously. Okay, so it's an ignorance in a way, and it's something that it has to be reinforced. And how do we do it? Yeah, we'll talk about that. Costs. Okay, and like I said, food security for a country is extremely important, and this will require a lot of planning by a governmental agency to actually predict what is the consumption of these items during and when are these crops produced, and what do we import, and if we import anything, if I import it from a particular country, then you've got to assess the risk of that country and their food security. Now, let's say, for example, we're importing potatoes from, let's say, somewhere at Africa, and we've been doing it for years, let's say, and then suddenly there's a kind of an endemic breaking out in that country, and a lot of people are falling sick. So there's nobody to go and harvest the potatoes and bring it across. So what happens is whoever's importing from that country is also going to get affected. So not only does this is not just internal food security, it's also who do we get supplied from. So food security is like putting money in the bank, and that we have to store that kind of food. Some of it has a shelf life. So there's a lot of factors that get into it. But all these contribute to a low health quotient. So what is the role of the government? Okay. I think the government all the governments in the world are definitely looking into this. And it's a big challenge for them, because providing access to clean water is something challenging, because the sources of water are themselves getting bad, or they're getting scarce. And this overpopulation, there is like overcrowding in cities, densities of population are crowding. So the ability to get access to that puts a strain on infrastructure. You have more pipes, you have more taps, you have more tanks, you name it. And then a lot of it depends on the rain we get. So providing access to clean water is always a challenge for many, many countries. Okay. And probably it's a worldwide thing. But yeah, they do bottle it, and you could pay anywhere between 20 to about 2,000 rupees a bottle of Evian spring water is actually cheap. Okay. There are waters that are more expensive than food. Uh, the government also have to try and reduce infestation, because infestation is something that can destroy crops, they can spread diseases. Uh, it's very, very important to reduce infestation. And governments are very critical, and most governments put this as a priority. I mean, it's really, really something that many governments focus on first, because if there is no food, and because once something gets bad, it starts spreading very rapidly. Whereas access to clean water, there's still way to get distributed by getting a bottle of water and giving it to them. So, of course, food security is something all governments are involved with, to make sure that they can feed their country, their nation. And it is a continuous process, and it's monitored extremely closely throughout the world, and including even in India. It's something that's always on the top of a lot of people's minds. So behind the scenes, a lot of great things have been happening. And for example, we've decided not to export wheat for some time, because we know that we're going to have shortages, and we may not be able to feed our own people. And wheat, for example, is an extremely important component of a lot of our Indian food. So it's not something we can give up easily, unless uh, we are growing in excess, and then it makes sense. We can actually give it up. And of course, health facilities, which is like access to medicine. It's not just the hospital. Um, Transport to these locations. It's damn important, right? I mean, if you can't get to a hospital, then how the hell are you going to get cured? I don't have access to a shop to go and eat the food. And so health facilities, access to places is something that is hand in roll with town planning, with transport, and with infrastructure. So it's the role. The government has a huge role in this, and they spend a lot of time administrating this, planning, deciding what has to be done next. And it's the boundaries keep changing, because it can many things can affect it. And of course, I think all countries in the world saw quite a hammering on our health facilities during COVID. And a lot of governments had to rethink what they thought was really, hey, it's okay, it's safe, we're all like, we can manage. But of course, something like this, now, whether it happened naturally or whether this was, as I'm sure you've seen a lot of reports online, that it was probably an engineered one, or it leaked out accidentally and things like that. But there's nothing to say that this won't happen again. Okay. And it might happen naturally, then you can't blame anyone, right? It's not a question of blaming, it's a question of being able to be resilient when we hit that point. And so the roles of the government, not just handling people and getting votes, and they've got a lot of stuff to do. Of course, there are autonomous organizations within governments to look after this, but a lot of it has to go through the ruling parties, and they have to pass bills if they have to change things, or they have to rebudget, reallocate. So it's not so simple. Now, what is your role in the whole thing? I know. Yeah, so that's why it's kind of important to know. Like I said, be mindful of what you eat. Okay, it's extremely important. What are the oils you're consuming? Are you using processed carbs, using more natural carbs? What are the nutrients in the food? Be mindful of what you're eating. Okay, and of course, you got to know your body. Now, everyone's body is different. You are the one who knows your body the best. For example, if I eat too many apples, then this will happen to me. Or if I eat too many oranges, then I'll get an acidity or something. So you have got to know your body. There are certain places where you can push it and can't push it. And remember, always seek the prevention. Prevention is always, but don't wait for something to happen so you can get cured. Okay. Of course, also make sure you educate your immediate family about these things. Okay. Easier said than done, but at least spread that word around. Of course, avoiding plastics is something that has become the key and principal thing of today. And it avoid using anything that's synthetically made. Okay. So move towards reusable items, glassware, cutlery, which can be washed and used again. Perfect. Of course, like I said, avoid aluminum because it's not good for, you get older and becomes a geriatric problem. So something to avoid. Throw out those aluminum stuff as far as you can. And especially if you're making teas and coffees, don't make them in aluminum vessels. It's not good. Okay. And of course, improve your air quality indoor. It's like, uh, just because you're within the walls of your house, it doesn't mean that you're not getting the toxins that are actually coming in. So why am I telling you this? It may sound very simple, and it may sound something like you're already doing, but what happens is you set an example. And when you set an example and maybe you want to talk to it about, people say, oh, I've got these indoor plants and this is what it does. Or you just say, these are certain things I avoid because, like see, maida, for example, causes these things. And just by spreading that little awareness, and if you're practicing it yourself, then what happens is it becomes a good example. And people learn from that. Okay, you'll be surprised. People say, oh, yeah, he's doing this for a reason. Maybe I should try it out. And indirectly, what you're doing is you're actually improving the health quotient of your immediate friend circle, probably your neighborhood, and that becomes the city, and that the city becomes the state, and the state becomes the country. So it's a very silent way of getting about it. But nevertheless, unless somebody practices it, nobody's going to be able to understand what's the benefit of it and why you're doing it. So a lot of people will see it and say, okay, I think this person's kind of looks healthy. He's seems to be more cheerful or whatever. So this is your role. I mean, even though it's a very tiny piece of it and it's a small piece of the equation, but if everyone did this, if the whole country did this, I don't think we would be having all these complications. Wouldn't you think? So thank you for being here. And so that's kind of the end of my topic for now. So I'm open to the floor for any questions and answers. At least questions. Answers we'll have to see.